Get out right now! Get out right now! Get out right now!
The morning my husband won $500 million, he emptied our life savings and told me to leave because she was moving in. Looking back, I should have seen the signs long before that morning. Rob had been drifting for months, late nights, at work, a phone he kept face down, conversations that felt shorter every week. We weren't fighting more, we were talking less. And somehow, that silence felt heavier than shouting ever could. Still, nothing prepared me for the way he spoke when he walked into the dining room that morning. "We need to talk," he said, the same way he'd say he needed to pay a bill or fix the garage door. I was halfway through making breakfast. He didn't sit down. He just placed 2 papers on the table and stepped back like he couldn't wait to be done with the conversation. The first was a withdrawal statement. Our joint savings, the account we'd built slowly, carefully, painfully over years, was completely emptied. The second was a separation agreement, already drafted, already signed. I stared at the papers, waiting for an explanation that didn't come. "I'm moving forward with my life," he said. His tone wasn't angry, it wasn't emotional, it was tired, or maybe practiced, like he'd rehearsed this a dozen times alone. "And the money?" I asked. It was the only thing I could form into words. "I've taken what I'm entitled to," he said. "I need you out of the house today. She's coming later and I don't want drama." There it was, plain, almost boring in its cruelty. We weren't breaking apart. He'd already replaced me. Something in me cracked, but not loudly. It was a quiet internal shift, the kind that comes when your body understands something your mind isn't ready to accept. I didn't argue, and it wasn't because I agreed. I just couldn't find my footing. Everything had happened before I even knew a conversation needed to take place. Upstairs, I packed slowly, mechanically, my hands moving while my thoughts lagged behind. I wasn't calm, I was overwhelmed. And shock has a way of disguising itself as composure. Before leaving, I opened the drawer in my small home office, the one where I kept old documents and forgotten errands. Without really knowing why, I took an envelope I'd slipped in there weeks ago. At the time, it felt insignificant. Now it felt like the only thing that still belonged to me. Rob didn't follow me outside. He didn't shout or threaten or apologize. He just stayed at the dining table, scrolling through his phone, already somewhere I couldn't reach. I walked to my car with one suitcase and that envelope in my hand. At the time, I believed I was leaving with nothing. I didn't realize yet that the envelope held the first thread of a truth that would unravel everything he thought he'd secured. I didn't go back to the house to fight. I went back because I didn't understand how a marriage could end in a single morning. And my mind kept circling the same question: what just happened? Part of me hoped Rob would open the door and say he'd made a mistake, or that the papers were a terrible overreaction, that there was something, anything, left to talk about. When I pulled into the driveway the next day, there was a car I didn't recognize parked where mine used to sit. A small detail, but it hit harder than I expected. I hesitated before knocking. I didn't want a confrontation. I just wanted clarity, a voice, something human in all this. The door opened almost immediately. A woman stood there, mid-30s, neatly dressed, calm. She looked surprised, but not caught, more like she'd been expecting me at some point. Yes? She asked, polite but guarded. I came to speak with Rob. I need to understand what's going on. She stepped slightly out of the doorway, pulling it closed behind her as if on instinct. Rob isn't here right now. Her tone wasn't hostile. It was measured, controlled, like someone trying to manage a situation without escalating it. I'm his wife, I said, though it felt strange saying it out loud. I didn't get any notice about any of this. I wanted to talk. Something flickered across her face. Not guilt, exactly, but discomfort. I think it's best if you give Rob some space. He's trying to move forward, and this is already difficult. The phrasing struck me. Move forward. The exact words Rob had used. So, you knew about the separation? She exhaled softly, not defensive, resigned. He told me things weren't working between you two for a long time. I'm not here to cause problems, but he made a decision and he's trying to make the transition easier for everyone. Everyone. A strange word, considering only one of us had been left with a suitcase in the car. I didn't push further, not because I agreed, but because I could tell she wouldn't give me anything real. And maybe I wasn't ready to hear it anyway. All right, I understand. It wasn't true, but it was all I could manage. As I walked back to my car, something in me shifted. Not anger, not yet, but clarity. She hadn't answered my questions, and maybe she couldn't, because the decisions weren't hers. They were his. I sat in the driver's seat and opened the small envelope I'd taken from the office drawer. The photocopy of the lottery ticket, my signature, the store receipt with the timestamp and my debit card number. I held them carefully, as if they might break. Rob thought he'd taken everything, but he didn't know what I still had. And for the first time since this started, I felt a small, steady sense of direction forming beneath the shock. I didn't have a plan when I left the house. I just drove until the road felt quiet enough for my thoughts to settle. Eventually, I ended up at my storage unit, a place I hadn't visited in months. It was where I kept the things Rob said took up too much space in the house. The metal door groaned as I pulled it open. Inside, everything smelled faintly of cardboard and dust. I sat on an old folding chair and took out the envelope I'd grabbed without thinking. I slid the contents out on my lap. First was a photocopy of the lottery ticket, the one I'd made weeks earlier when I was cleaning out the office drawer. At the time, it felt like nothing more than me being overly organized. Now, I stared at my own handwriting across the back of the ticket, my signature, dated the day I bought it. Underneath it was the store receipt, crumpled but legible. Time, date, location, last 4 digits of my debit card. I held it between my fingers and tried to steady my breath. I remembered the day clearly, running errands, grabbing groceries, buying a few tickets at the register out of routine, signing the back of the one I scratched off before going home. I'd thrown everything into the drawer without a second thought. I never imagined that tiny action, signing my name, would end up mattering at all. But now it did. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I'd been blindsided once already, and I refused to let emotion outrun facts. So I took out my phone and searched. Who legally owns a lottery ticket? Does signature matter? Proof of purchase lottery dispute. Most of the results were from forums, news articles, or state guidelines, but one line stood out repeatedly. The person who signs the ticket is presumed to be the legal owner. I read it 3 times. Presumed. Not guaranteed, but presumed. It wasn't victory, not even close, but it was something. A thread of certainty in a situation that had felt ungraspable. I sat there in the storage unit, surrounded by old boxes and forgotten belongings, and began writing everything down. Dates, conversations, account balances, the timeline of events. If I had even a chance at fighting this, I needed clarity, not emotion. Before leaving, I slipped the photocopy and receipt into a protective sleeve I found in one of the boxes. I sealed it, labeled it with today's date, and placed it carefully inside my bag. Rob might have believed he had erased me from our life overnight. But now, for the first time, I had reason to believe the story wasn't finished. Not yet. I found Delgado's office through a local legal aid directory. It wasn't the kind of place with glass walls or receptionists offering bottled water. It was a converted house with creaking floors and a sign taped to the door that read, "Please knock, appointments only." That felt right. I wasn't looking for theatrics. I was looking for clarity. Delgado was in his mid-40s, direct in a way that didn't feel cold. He motioned for me to sit and asked me to lay out everything I had. I placed the photocopied ticket, the receipt, and the separation document on his desk. He didn't interrupt. He just read. After a minute, he tapped the photocopy with his pen. He said, "This is your signature." "Yes," I said. "The day I bought it." "And he had the original ticket?" he asked. I nodded, but no. He took it before I even realized we'd won. Delgado exhaled, not dramatically, but like someone piecing together a familiar pattern. He said, "All right, let's walk through this." He turned his monitor so I could see a section of state lottery law. He highlighted one line. The person whose signature appears on the ticket is presumed to be the legal owner. My chest tightened, not with excitement, but with something closer to relief and fear at the same time. He continued, "The receipt strengthens your position. It shows you bought the ticket, but the court will also look at possession. You're in a gray area, not hopeless, not simple." I appreciated the honesty. I asked him, "What can I do?" He said, "We file for a temporary injunction to freeze any major transfers of the winnings. If your husband is moving money, we need to stop that before it disappears." I said, "He already emptied our savings," without telling me. He wrote something down. He said, "That helps your case. Not the theft, but the pattern. Judges don't like sudden financial movements during marital disputes, especially large ones." He handed me a short form. He said, "Fill this out. I'll draft the filings today." As I completed the paperwork, I felt the smallest shift inside me. Not triumph, not certainty, but steadiness, something to hold on to. Before he left, he offered one final piece of advice. Don't confront him. Don't warn him. The less noise you make, the cleaner this process stays. I nodded, slipping the documents back into my bag. Walking out into the afternoon light, I realized I didn't feel powerless anymore, just aware.
of how long the road ahead might be and how important it was to take each step carefully. The shock was fading. Something else was taking its place. Direction.
The first indication that things were shifting came quietly, the same way everything else had, through a notification on my phone. Even after Rod cleared out our savings, he hadn't removed me from one of the older joint accounts, a checking account we rarely used. I opened it out of habit more than hope, expecting to see the usual small balance. Instead, I saw a string of withdrawals. $1,200, jewelry purchase. $2,600, electronics store. $900, ATM withdrawal. $3,300, home furnishings. Individually, they weren't alarming. Together, they looked frantic. I took screenshots and forwarded them to Delgado. His reply was short. Document everything, don't engage. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Transfers, cash withdrawals, a couple of failed attempts to move larger sums. It was subtle, but it told a story. Rob wasn't being cautious. He wasn't planning. He was reacting. And people who react like that usually feel something slipping. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, but I didn't. If anything, I felt a dull ache, the kind you get watching someone you once loved unravel in slow motion. But sympathy didn't erase what he'd done. It just made the whole situation feel heavier. One afternoon, I drove through the old neighborhood. I stayed in my car, parked on the opposite side of the street. The curtains were open. Through the window, I saw Rob pacing the living room, phone in hand. His movements were sharp, restless. A few minutes later, the front door opened, and the mistress, Claire, stepped outside to take a call. Her face wasn't soft or affectionate. It was tense, businesslike. She paced too, but in the opposite direction, as if they were both orbiting separate worries under the same roof. Then I noticed something else. A second car I'd never seen before, parked near the driveway. The same silver one I'd noticed once already. Someone sat inside, waiting. It didn't take much imagination to understand. Whatever Rob thought he was living, Claire was living a different one entirely. A notification buzzed on my phone again. $4,850, withdrawal flagged as unusual activity. I saved the alert. Another line in the record. Delgado called that evening. He said, the judge scheduled a hearing 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks. Long enough for nerves to build, short enough for things to accelerate. I asked, what should I do in the meantime? He said, stay quiet. He's already creating a trail we couldn't create for him. Let him. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed in my sister's guest room, holding my phone with the most recent alert on the screen. Rob was spending freely. Claire was distancing herself, and the life he'd built overnight was already beginning to shift under its own weight. I didn't feel triumphant, just steady, watching, waiting. The next shift didn't come from Rob. It came from the bank. An alert appeared on my phone early in the morning, a flagged attempt to transfer funds from an account I didn't recognize, a new account, likely created after the lottery win. The transfer failed, then another one followed minutes later. The strange part was the name attached to the second attempt, Claire Jennings, the mistress. I forwarded the screenshot to Delgado. He called almost immediately. That's significant, he said. If he granted her access or if she's moving money without permission, it reinforces instability and asset control. Judges pay attention to that. I heard paper rustling on his end. He was already filing the screenshot. "Don't reach out to him," he added. "Let the trail build." That trail built faster than either of us expected. 2 days later, I found myself driving past the house again, not to watch, just to keep moving. Sitting still made my thoughts loud. Passing by made them quieter. But when I slowed near the curb, I saw Rob on the front porch, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. He wasn't composed. He wasn't triumphant. He looked rattled. His gestures were sharp, agitated. At one point, he stopped pacing and pressed a hand to his forehead. Not long after, Claire stepped outside. She wasn't wearing the confident, collected expression she had the first time I met her. This time, her posture was stiff, her arms crossed, her eyes avoiding his. They weren't talking to each other. They were talking around each other, like two coworkers forced into an uncomfortable task. I didn't linger, but I didn't leave either. A silver car pulled up, the same one I'd seen twice before. A man got out, younger than Rob, dressed casually, moving with an ease that contrasted sharply with the tension on the porch. Claire walked down the steps without hesitation and met him halfway. Rob followed behind her, confusion on his face. "Who is this?" he asked. She didn't answer. She just opened the car door and placed the duffel bag inside. A bag I recognized. One from our guest closet. One she must have taken when I didn't object. Rob stepped closer. "Claire, what are you doing? What's going on?" Her silence was answer enough. The other man closed the trunk. Claire got in beside him. They drove off without a single backward glance. Rob stood alone in the driveway, phone still in hand, staring after them like he just stepped into a cold room and couldn't understand why he was shaking. My phone buzzed. Another alert. $27,300. Withdrawal processed. Made that same morning, before she left. Delgado texted seconds later. She drained one of his accounts. He'll have to disclose it in court. I leaned back in my seat, breath steady. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't even feel satisfied. Just certain. Everything Rob had built on impulse and secrecy was collapsing exactly the way things collapse when they're built too quickly, from the inside out. And he had no idea there was still more coming. Court wasn't dramatic. It wasn't chaotic or loud. It was a room with beige walls, stiff chairs, and a judge who looked like she'd heard every kind of story twice already. Delgado sat beside me, calm, as always. Rob sat at the opposite table. He looked thinner, or maybe just worn. The confidence he carried the day he pushed those papers across our table was gone. His shirt wasn't tucked in properly. His eyes were tired. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel anger. Just distance. Like I was finally seeing him without the years attached. The judge began by reviewing the documents we submitted. She lifted the photocopy of the ticket, looked at my signature on the back, then held up the store receipt with my debit card number. She asked, "And the original ticket?" Delgado stood. "Your Honor, in the respondent's possession, without the petitioner's knowledge or consent." Rob shifted in his chair. He tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "You'll have your turn." Next came the bank records. Withdrawals, transfers, failed attempts, the flagged activity tied to Claire's name.
Delgado presented everything meticulously, each page placed in order, each date highlighted. Your Honor, this pattern shows unilateral financial decisions made without the petitioner's awareness both before and after the winnings were claimed. When Rob's turn came, he stood and tried to frame it differently. He said, "We're married. Whatever she bought, we bought. Whatever she signed for us. And yes, I moved money, but I thought the funds were mine. I didn't know she would." He stopped there, realizing he had nowhere to take the sentence. The judge studied him for a long moment, long enough for the silence to feel heavy. She said, "Mr. Harris, marriage does not grant one spouse the right to remove all financial access from the other without notice, nor does it override the legal presumption of ownership on a signed lottery ticket accompanied by proof of purchase." She turned toward me. I didn't breathe. The court grants full ownership of the lottery funds to the petitioner. The words didn't feel triumphant. They felt solid, like ground finally appearing beneath my feet after weeks of falling. The judge added one final note. Given the documented financial activity, an audit and accounting review is ordered. Any remaining joint funds or improperly moved assets will be addressed accordingly. Rob sat down slowly, like someone lowering themselves into cold water. Delgado placed a packet of documents in front of me. He said, "This is the ruling. We'll handle everything from here." When we stepped outside the courthouse, the air felt different. Not lighter, just clearer. Rob approached, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. He murmured, "We don't have to end things like this. Maybe we can talk." But I wasn't that version of myself anymore, not the one who hesitated or tried to read between the lines to salvage something broken. There was nothing to salvage. I walked past him, down the courthouse steps, holding the ruling in my hand. And for the first time since this began, I felt steady from the inside out. After the hearing, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet. I went back to the storage unit one last time and sat where this whole process began. The photocopy of the ticket and the receipt were still in their plastic sleeve. Simple pieces of paper, yet they'd carried the weight of everything I had left. Rob had taken our savings and walked away without hesitation. He'd replaced me before I even knew we were ending. But none of that determined my worth. The judge's ruling didn't undo the pain, but it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I wasn't powerless. I never had been. I placed the documents back in the box, closed the lid, and returned the storage key. No celebration, no dramatic goodbye, just a small moment of peace. This wasn't about winning money. It was about reclaiming myself, more than I ever expected. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If there's one thing I hope you take away, it's that strength often comes quietly in the choices we make when no one is cheering us on. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did any part of this story resonate with you? What would you have done differently in my situation? How did the ending make you feel? Please share your reflections in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. Thank you for spending this time with me. If the story spoke to you, please like the video, subscribe, share it with someone who may need it, and turn on the notification bell. Your support truly helps this channel grow and allows more people to discover these stories. Thank you for being here.